Welcome students to our Student Camps 2022 PEP preparation series. Today we continue to look at science as we prepare for our curriculum-based test. Now for our examination tips. So we have seen that there are many times our questions will have information, diagrams and tables. And so today we want to remind you to pay close attention to these diagrams and tables. Examine them for details, examine your tables for patterns and trends. And this should help you in answering your question. So let's look at our first question. We're told that human activities, which you know, have led to more effects of climate change being felt by Caribbean territories. And so the question is asking us which of these events in the Caribbean is not likely to be a consequence of climate change. So here we need to remind ourselves what are the consequences of climate change, and so we're looking for an answer which is not a consequence of climate change. So we know that climate change results in us experiencing floods and droughts, so that is true. And in some cases, as we have seen over the past few years, our hurricane season, which we normally expect to end in November, there are cases when it continues into December. So that is a consequence of climate change. Now, in the Caribbean, the temperatures are generally higher in the summer, June, July, than in January. Now, this is constant. It doesn't change. It's not as a result of climate change. So our answer, therefore, is A, because our temperatures being higher in the summer is not because of climate change. All right. Our second question, still under the environment, and we're told that our scientists agree that Earth has warmed by a couple of degrees, well, in this case 0.6, over 100 years, right? And so they estimate that this temperature will increase, the average temperature that is, by another 2 to 5 degrees in the next 30 years. So generally, you would be asked to think of how can we reduce climate change, right? So we want to look at activities that can help to slow down the warming of Earth. So let's see. And here the question says 2. So we need 2 answers that will help us to slow down the warming of Earth. So let's see. Do we cut down more forests? Would that slow down the warming of Earth? How would cutting down forest help in that activity? Cutting down forest actually is not a good idea. Yes, because it will lead to loss of cover that would trap carbon dioxide, right? So that is not a good idea. Should we make electricity by burning coal? And this coal is the coal that you would normally mine, right? Not the charcoal. Would that slow down global warming? No. What about us driving less, taking public transportation, reducing the emissions? Yes, that should actually work to help to slow down the warming, though it will take some time. What about changing your light bulbs to LEDs? Yes, so therefore the best answers would be A and D. All right. Now we're getting to look at sound, the unit on sound. So we're told that when a guitar string is plucked, we know it makes a sound. And the student now constructed an instrument using wood, string and nails. And essentially, when each string is struck or plucked, we would get a different pitch. So what are the features? And we're looking again for 2 responses, 2 features of the strings that would help us to change the pitch of the sound. So here, we want to pause to remind ourselves of what is the pitch. What's the pitch? Okay, so let's look at a picture of a guitar. Yes? All right. So when you look at this guitar, if you get time to look at a guitar, what do you notice about the strings? And even looking at this picture, you'll see that some of the strings look thicker than others, all right? And there are other instruments that some may have longer strings and some have shorter strings. So in the guitar, this guitar actually has some being thicker and so they will produce a different pitch when you pluck them. And so the instrument that is being made by this student, do you see that there are some changes here? Yes? What do you see? So the strings at the bottom looks thicker as well as longer than the ones at the top. Great. So let's go back to our question. The question asked, which two features of those strings would change the pitch of the sound? If I change the color of the strings, would that change the pitch? So obviously that is an answer that is incorrect, right? Good, so we can take that one out. The length of the strings. Now from the picture, we would have seen that the length of the strings changed, right? So that is a possible answer. The shape or the material that is used, would that change the pitch? Not necessarily in this case, but the thickness of the strings, as shown by the diagram, would have changed. And so the two features would be the length and the thickness of the strings. Good. I hope you're getting a gist of things. All right, another question on sound. Angel is making her instrument and she wants to know what she could do to make a louder sound. So here we must again remind ourselves that loudness is a different property from pitch. Right, so if you want to get something louder, what would you do? If I move the strings closer together or further apart, would that make it louder? If I pluck the strings gently, would that make it louder? But if I pluck them harder, then definitely it would be louder. So our answer is D. Great job. All right. A student is building a house for his pet dog. So now we're looking at properties of materials. He puts a window in the dog house to be able to see the dog. So let's look at the information. What property should the material for the window, and that's the window of the dog house, what property should it have? So he wants to be able to see the dog. That is the information in the question. So what property must this window have? Should it be waterproof? I mean, we want it to be waterproof, but would that make it better to see the dog? No. We want a strong window, but that would not help us to see the dog. What about flexibility? Would a window being flexible help us to see the dog? No. So it means that the property that we're looking for is that the window should be transparent. Beautiful. All right. So let's look at the next question. Still under properties of materials, looking at states of matter. So we're told that droplets of water formed on a window near a pot of water, hot water that is. So that's a very important piece of information. The water is hot. And we're asked what best explains, and so we're looking for the best explanation for why droplets formed on the window. So just think about you're in your kitchen, you're cooking, well not you, your parents are cooking, and the pot is boiling, steam is being released from the pot, and if you look closely at a window nearby, you may actually see droplets on the window. And so we want to know what is the explanation for the droplets being formed on the window. All right, so before we even answer that question, just want to remind you of what this may look like. So in our picture, we have a window and we can see the droplets forming on the window. Or you may remember probably getting up one morning and you see some droplets on the grass. How did that reach there? How did the droplets reach on the grass? What is happening? What property must that grass have for the droplets to form on it? Okay, so let's go back to our question. It says the window, right, must be, and we're looking at these properties. Is it that the window is cold, the window is hard, the window is smooth, or the window is transparent? Would those properties cause the droplets to form? A matter of fact, what process is taking place? Condensation, and condensation requires a cold surface. And so the window must be cold for the droplets to form on the window. All right. And now this is our final question. Notice we have a lot of information to analyze. A student is investigating the strength of different types of paper by hanging different masses on the paper. All all right? And so we're given a graph, and so before we even get any further, we're going to take this step by step. Look at our diagram to understand what is happening in our picture. All right, so let's look more closely at our diagram. So here we can see clearly that the paper, right, how it is set up, we have some masses that we're hanging onto the paper, and obviously we're looking at the strength of the paper. How long would it take before it will actually start to tear, right? And so a strong paper, what do you think would happen to a strong paper? It would require more masses, yes? And a very weak paper, yes, would not, well, by the time you put on one of those masses, it should tear, right? Okay, so that is our diagram for our investigation. Now let's look at the graph in a bit more detail. So we have 4 different types of paper represented on that bar graph, and on the y-axis we are shown different masses that we use. So we would have used 1, 2, 3, 4 different masses, and we use that on our different types of paper. So the newspaper was able to hold 2 of those masses before it started to tear. The tissue, just 1. The printer paper, 3 of those masses, and the writing paper could hold 4. So the question is asking us, which is the strongest paper? Now, from what we have just shown, which of those papers would be the strongest? It would certainly be the one that held the most of the masses that we placed on it, right? So which paper was that? Look at the graph again. What's your answer? Yes, I hope you got writing paper, because in the graph, it held the most masses. Great job, students. So I trust that that exercise was helpful and that it will help you to prepare for your examinations. Now continue to practice, and all the best on your exams.